about this game is that I could have sworn this left Game Pass not that long ago. But now we can get the chance to actually play this thing. On Steam for me, however, since I didn't think I'd get a chance again on Game Pass. Oh well, guess that's what you get from gaming subscription apps. Anyway, Firewatch tells us the story of Henry, and quite literally walks us through his time as a Firewatch lookout at a national park in Wyoming, wherein the Watchman quickly becomes the Watched. It's a very story-heavy open-world walking simulator as you stroll around the open park, explore its mysteries, and do whatever your totally just a friend on the radio is telling you to do. Well, whether or not you see her in that way depending on your dialogue options. Yes, like before, this is indeed another game with varying dialogue options on how you, yes you, would like to respond to conversations. And how do they affect the outcomes? Well, without giving too much away, mainly cosmetically. I know the devs have stated that the game is meant to be less linear than people say it is, but the story never once dramatically changes its course, and the characters simply may or may not reference something that you might have already said before returning to the predetermined script. Not to undermine how impressive that kind of stuff is. I never thought tossing a stereo into a lake would haunt me with paranoia so much. Gameplay wise, you walk and you jump and you occasionally climb, and that's about it. But the main appeal of these walking sims is immersion into the story, and this is one that actually did a pretty good job for the most part. Those varying dialogues I mentioned earlier, while inconsequential in the super grand scheme, did succeed in making this a more personal experience with how you want to play Henry out to be, whether he be flirty or sarcastic or just not overly talkative, while also keeping true with the character he already is. The characters in general all felt authentic, and huge kudos to the voice actors for a terrific job with their excellent portrayals, although I'll admit that the whole plot about the Goodwins never really drew me in until near the end, where it suddenly becomes very important. I was a little bit more concerned about who was smart enough to gather so much information from my totally just a friend and I, and what happened to those two troublemakers we encountered at the start. I guess that's what you get where a game about not really being alone is set in Wyoming of all places. Just as we were starting to lack in first-person shooters for this month, Bethesda out of nowhere decided to shadow drop a remaster of Quake 2, one of the old granddaddies of the genre, faithful to its old look and feel, packed with all of its expansions, ports, and even brand new content. I'll preface right now that I've never actually played any Quake games before, so I will be going into this purely as a first-timer, but long story short, in the original Quake, you've been invaded by an alien race known as the Strahd, and the human military has been sent to the invaders' homeworld in order to strike back against them. And what follows is the classic fast-paced, don't you dare slow down secret goodie hiding shooter you would find straight out of the 90s. It still keeps a lot of outdated, old-timey features, such as one single loud jumping grunt from the player character, and low-res 3D graphics you couldn't mistake for any other era, and aim down sights is merely an afterthought, where you can simply use right mouse button as a secondary way to jump. But rest assured, I still love these inclusions. It keeps this classic Quake game grounded into what it was by retaining its feel with all its old quirks and cheesy features that they wouldn't dare make in most AAA shooters these days, which are still perfectly functional since they don't classify as complete jank. But with that being said, this game from 1997 does still feel very dated in the less good ways too, not least with its samey environments, dull grey and brown colouring acting as the game design equivalent of gruel literally everywhere, and gameplay that does admittedly get repetitive after a while, but I suppose that's just the game we got over 26 years ago. What's important to look at here is what they've done as a remaster, and all I can say is, if any game deserved to be subtitled Definitive Edition, it is literally this. Again, sticking true to the look and feel of the original, they have updated models, lighting, included every playable version of Quake 2, from the Reckoning and the Ground Zero expansions, to the exclusive N64 version, fully re-rendered cutscenes and unseen concept art, as well as playable levels from the E3 showcase of this game the year it came out. But that's not all. They also have their brand new expansion level, Call of the Machine. And all I have to say is, well, this expansion is excellent. The level design off the bat feels far more modern, and has way more interesting locations outside of the boring brown mud rectangles from before. And even then, it still feels at home in the Quake universe. It's paced brilliantly with all its enemies handing out weapons to you like an all-you-can-eat buffet, offers a steep challenge that forces you to utilize an arsenal you'd otherwise consider overpowered, and even lets you fight Emmanuel Macron and his sons. Overall, even if the base game is still quite outdated by a lot of today's standards, this is still a highly faithful updating of a classic FPS title that absolutely sets the bar high on how to remaster a game. And even if you don't use Game Pass, it only costs under 10 quid to get every piece of content ever made and more from this single game, and is simply a free update if you already happen to own it on Steam. Between this game and Baldur's Gate 3, it makes me happy to see games favoring art and the consumer in recent months, especially after some of the tripe we've dealt with in this previous year.